one and all. Welcome to the T-Bird podcast. This is episode 2 of the podcast, and this is going to be a very special stream because I have one of the coolest streamers and community members of the Pulse Chain ecosystem, and everyone knows him by the name of Coexistence Stephen, who also puts out a lot of great content on Twitter as well. Definitely recommend people to be following Coexistence Stephen if you're not already. And without any further ado, I shall bring him up. Stephen, are you there?
What's going on, brother?
What's going on, man? How are things? All right?
Very, very good. Yeah, very, very good, man. How are you?
Good. Yeah. So yeah, it's just it's good to have you on the stream here, and looking forward to building momentum with my content here as we roll forward this year. And I really feel like this year is a really pivotal year even just purely in the crypto context, because of just where we are in the cycle, and but in the context on the subject of the cycle, which I actually want to get your take on. Well, let's just get straight to that. Like, where do you see where we're at in the context of the rhyming nature of the cycle itself, being in 2025, the kind of expectations that a lot of people, many people in crypto by this stage in the life cycle of Bitcoin, where it's headed for the rest of this year.
Yeah, so I've been trying to analyze this for the last, really since starting crypto, but I've been really digging deep into it for the last couple of weeks to see are we in a macro bearish trend or a macro bullish trend. So I'm leaning towards macro bullish still. I'm leaning towards macro bullish, but there's still a percentage chance that we are in the bearish scenario, but everything's being dictated by Trump. Everything's being dictated by what they're doing in the American government, how they're trying to really suppress everything to lower interest rates, lower energy prices, lower food prices, so that America first can really start to shine. So I saw him do a video with Elon the other day at the White House in front of his helicopter, saying that everything was looking a lot better. Interest rates were down, energy prices were down, food prices were down. So I think all these regulation changes, they are the biggest market makers on the planet. What do market makers do? They manipulate prices so that they can get the best entries. So what are they trying to do? They're trying to manipulate things down as low as they can so that their country can get the best prices in this asset class that is cryptocurrency. So I'm still bullish, and I still think this is going to be a very, very good year. But people are really starting to feel it, man. People are really, really starting to feel it.
You're seeing the pain like across crypto. It's absolutely savage, and I think if you have some level of emotional awareness, you're just going to be, even if you're not even too much of an emotional person yourself, you're still going to be feeling that emotion from everyone else,
100%.
On a pretty aggressive level. So, but again, as a lot of us know who've been around in crypto long enough know that you have to. I guess it's okay to be in tune with the emotionality of things, but not to get too overwhelmed by it, and just to always bring yourself back psychologically and emotionally to an objective place, and just keeping perspective zoomed out, and just know that, okay, this is where we are on the calendar. Yes, there's always that possibility, however remote it might be, that some aspect of the cycle isn't going to play out the way it has in previous cycles. Like, some could argue it's a little bit left translated. With we're seeing a proper sort of a definitive new all-time high in Bitcoin since January, alongside the Trump meme coin spike, blow off, in conjunction with Solana and all that. But I'm the same as you, man. I've got full bullish sentiment for the rest of this year, and And the thing is that, like, I've with some of the things that I've come to learn and understand in the context of energy, numerology, astrology, I personally, in my individual situation, have to go be full steam ahead. And I always have been full steam ahead anyway, like with my content on Twitter. I'm not sure how long you've been following my account. I've been around a long time. And I've been at it like nonstop, like a fucking animal, since back in 2020. So, but yeah, so I need to take it a notch up, and start like allowing the community to feel comfortable to still want to be really interactive and really engaging, despite the level of like insane pain that we're seeing across the market, that people are feeling. And yeah, I could say also it's partly sort of a manifestation thing too, to an extent as well. Because what we put, in a lot of ways, what we put out into the universe comes back to us. So yeah. So is there anything specifically that you wanted to touch on with regard to any of the latest news that's been happening in the pulse ecosystem?
Not necessarily, but I definitely wanted to dig into what some of the things that you were just saying. So you were saying in regards to numerology, in regards to energy, you're feeling like this year is going to be a big year. How, in what way, what ways numerology, like in terms of numerology, like is that for you specifically, or is that for like a macro thing?
To me specifically, because we're all going to each have our own individual energetic vibration and energetic makeup, so to speak. This year is, or basically the energy aligns in many angles for me to go that much harder for multiple reasons. And one of the major reasons is because we're in the snake year in Eastern astrology, also known as Earth astrology, which is the most accurate form of astrology compared to the others. So that's the form of astrology I focus most on, synergistically with numerology as well, because you've got to look at all of the components and how they sort of how they gel with each other. So, but yeah, being in the snake year, I'm born in the ox year. So what that basically means is I have, and snake and rooster are in my friend energy triad as an ox.
Okay.
So basically what that implies is I've got the wind at my back. I've got positive energy basically at my back and around me for the entire length of the snake year. And the snake, so you and your audience and my audience too, that might not be aware, the snake year began on the 29th of January of this year. And it'll finish on the 17th of February of next year. So how the yearly calendar goes with what's referred to as the lunar calendar for Eastern astrology is it's not the same as Western astrology. In Western astrology, it's basically like each of the signs has a set time frame for each sign, like a length of time. It's the same each year, like in terms of like exact day. Like for example, let me give you an example of that. So I think it's what is it? I think February 19th is when Pisces. Anyway, I can't think of any top of my head, but anyway, in any case, in Eastern Earth astrology, it varies. It's slightly different each year in terms of that's the cusp window is in anywhere between middle of January to the middle of February. But it can start any the start of the Earth astrology year. Yeah, it can happen at any time, and how it's set, I couldn't tell you, but it is what it is. So, so yeah,
I've been of the belief that it's a more accurate form of measuring time than the Western Romanized calendar. I think it was since the Romans or Jesus came along, and they basically made it these set times, but every year it shifted out. So actually, like 1996 was actually the year 2000. Everything is shifted out. So the lunar calendar is more accurate, actually. So
100%, and it's the lunar calendar is that's why Eastern astrology is often labeled as Earth astrology, because it actually deals and addresses the energies of the Earth, of the planet that we're actually on. So with all the other astrologies, even though they all play their role to a certain extent, you can't discard them completely. They all have energetic significance, but there's a hierarchy of significance. But all the other astrologies are essentially dealing with energies associated with other planets or energies outside of the planet. So that's why Earth astrology deserves the most attention, because it deals with the energies that we're directly affected by because it's on this planet. So
okay.
So I hope that makes sense.
It does. Yeah, it does. I mean, I'm not hugely familiar with all this stuff. I know like the very, very basics. I've done a chart reading, I believe, where it measured all of those things based on my name, date of birth, all kinds of things. I did it a few years ago, and we were having that discussion about me being a tiger, and that's where I found out that I was a year of the fire tiger and all of these kinds of things. And it tracks out your destiny. I'm like, man, this is, like it's pretty good. It was pretty accurate. So.
Yeah, I mean, again, Western astrology does play a role in. So hypothetically, if you were to give me a full birthday, I would look at everything. I would look at Western astrology as well as your Eastern astrology, and there are traits and qualities that you will have with your Western astrology sign as well. But still, there's generally more room for error with Western astrology compared to Eastern astrology. With Eastern astrology, it's, for whatever reason, the strength is much more defined.
Well, it originated from the East. Would it have originated from the East?
Well, yeah. Well, that's why they also refer to it as Chinese astrology, because essentially the Chinese will know this shit.
Yeah,
it's only the West. The Western people in the Western countries that are still remaining relatively ignorant to it, or at least they might have some awareness of it, but they don't really treat it with that much reverence or that much any attention really, when they should be. I mean, even just the other day, I think it was like a few months ago, I was down in the city, and I saw a shop, and outside the shop it has the name Quan, Quan, and it's got 888, and it's like, and it actually wasn't even just a Chinese restaurant; it was specifically a Vietnamese restaurant, and actually the Vietnamese actually put out the 100% accurate information, whereas the Chinese slightly psyop it a little bit with their information, which doesn't surprise me. So I actually prefer to pay homage to the Vietnamese more than the Chinese, because the Vietnamese, and the main reason for that is because people think the rabbit is one of the signs when it's actually not. That's one of the major psyops that the Chinese put out. It's actually the cat, not the rabbit. And the Vietnamese know this. And when going back to that shot, so I looked up the numerological energy behind the word Quan. I think it was either 28 or 8, and 28 is the number of wealth, 8 is the number of money, and underneath it was 888, so 888, and that's all about. So they understand how to use numerology and astrology to attract money and wealth to them by using the energy. So
yeah, interesting, and it's such a huge part of this community as well. To be perfectly honest, this is probably where I've learned the majority of things that I know about numerology is through the pulse chain and hex community, and a lot of this is also centered around Richard and how he does things, and people are really they really notice all these patterns of when he launches things and these dates of birth, and it's really like a lot of our community centered around it, which is really quite fascinating.
Yeah, and just on exactly what you're talking about, I want to take this opportunity to pay huge respect to the hexagon that actually started to properly lead me to the right direction with regards to numerology and astrology. Because before this got, and so everyone knows, look him up. He's on Twitter, puts out a lot of great content, His Twitter handle is Matrix Mischief.
Oh, I love Matrix Mischief.
Yeah, man, he's a really switched on dude. He knows his stuff.
Yeah.
He was the one that put me onto GG33 and numerology and astrology initially. And up until that point, I had like a very sort of, I wouldn't even really genuinely call it like much knowledge, but I had awareness around it, and I was always curious and intrigued by numerology and astrology. But until he put me onto it and encouraged me to really do some more digging into it, that was what like really set me ablaze in terms of really seeing the powerful validity in understanding this information and understanding how to apply it even more so. Because when it comes to numerology and astrology, it's one thing to understand it and know it, but it's another thing to actually apply it in your real life and in the real world. So I basically started on that journey only back in May of last year. So it hasn't even been a year. So it hasn't even been a year since I really started to properly look into it. But I've gone down the rabbit hole pretty hardcore. So since then.
What is it about it that's really attracted you to it? What's made you really gravitate to it and feel this sense of truth around it?
Good question. So I started to, and it's an evolutionary process in terms of the accumulation of this knowledge. So the more you see how things connect and see how things line up energetically with people. Again, this stuff doesn't just apply to people; it applies to territories. It applies to all kinds of entities, whether it's a legal entity. It even goes. I mean, the stuff goes very deep, and even I'm only at the very basic level. I haven't gone up the ladder yet in terms of like really going like heavy deep into the really advanced stuff, which I'll be looking to do later down the track. But for now, I'm definitely satisfied with where, for the meantime, with where my understandings are right now. Basically, when you spend enough time looking at this stuff, like even just once you have an understanding of how to interpret numbers correctly and astrology correctly, and then even just looking at your own birthday, because it's all there. You look at your birthday and you start analyzing, even before you even analyze other people's energies, analyze your own. And again, in the occult world, it's all about knowing thyself, knowing who you are. So the key is to analyzing yourself first, and to figure out how the correct interpretations line up with yourself. And then once you know how you're moving correctly with your energy or moving incorrectly with your energy, you start to make adjustments accordingly. So that because the key with it all is about flowing with your energy, never against it.
Right.
So if you're always going to be up shit creek if you're going against your energy.
Yeah.
And again, this goes back to your question: why am I taking that extra step to go harder this year? It's because the energetics pushes me to, because the positive energy is there for me to leverage in my favor. But so whereas if it was the opposite, if I was in my enemy year, I have to contract, not expand, because I'll be constantly going against the energy. The energy will be constantly like going after me if I try to go against it. And so you have to chill. You have to fully lay low in your enemy year to minimize any kind of damage you can do to yourself.
Okay. And so you've learned, I mean, even that information about this being, obviously I knew it was a snake year, that much I knew, but even knowing that it's a high energy for your particular sign, do you learn all this through GG33?
All homage goes to GG33, Gary Grinberg. He is the number one source for numerology and astrology. He's a pretty amazing individual. He can be very abrasive. He can come across very abrasive to certain people, especially with regard to his politics. If you're if you haven't taken the time to actually get to know the person like in depth. But he's got like thousands of students. Yeah, I've got nothing but respect for the guy. He's not the number one person that's really taken it mainstream, because I can pretty much guarantee you that if I hadn't come across his information with the GG33 system, I probably would have remained too skeptical around it to basically prevent myself to really going deep in it.
So he's like a bridge. He's like the Alan Watts of numerology.
Yeah, and speaking of Alan Watts, he is one of my favorite philosophers. Always has been.
Alan Watts is a good.
Yeah, man. Yeah, he's also an amazing teacher. And the beautiful thing about this stuff too is even just with Alan Watts, like I've looked up his numerology and just sort of seen how things line up with him. Like, and you once you get into this kind of momentum, you'll start to look up all kinds of like famous people of influence, even members of your own family. And if, like, let's say there's a person in your family that there's always conflict with them, and just no matter what you do, you can't create any kind of balance or harmony with that person. If you understand numerology, there's probably a good chance that it's vibrationally based with the energetic conflict, without people even realizing it. And then when you look up the birthday and you're like, oh shit, okay, that makes total sense now. Why we just can't get along, you know?
Gotcha. Oh yeah. Man, yeah, it's I because Matrix Mischief, he's been like, yeah, look into GG33. I got a lot of time for the guy. He rubs people off the wrong way, but he calls it as it is. He doesn't beat around the bush, and that's what I really respect that. He's very abrasive as well, but
it's the same kind of quality that Richard Hart has.
Yes.
It's like those kind of characters, like what you have when it comes to people like Richard Hart or Gary Greenberg, you have to put aside all your whatever you might, all personal biases have to put to the side. And you've got to focus on, okay, what just purely and objectively and neutrally look at the information that they're putting out, and if what they're putting out has true worth, which I can clearly and evidently tell you does, both in the camp of Richard Hart and Gary, then they deserve your attention, and at the very least to focus on what their expertise is in, which is, like in Gary's case, numerology and astrology. In Richard's case, crypto. So we can leave that at there. So
just one more question, if you don't mind, with DG33. Is that something that you've like, have you done some sort of course of his, or you just learn through his YouTube, or how do you get
good question. I'm the sort of person that's like relentless in terms of figuring things out for myself. This also has always applied with crypto. I'll never like, well, especially definitely in crypto, I swore to myself I'll never pay for a course. And obviously, and Richard himself has even outlined the reasons why you would never throw your money into a course when you have the time and and the tenacity to actually learn things yourself in a self-educated way. You can can sort of work things out yourself. And also, there's never a guarantee that even the course that you paid for, you just don't know what the motivations are behind a lot of them as well.
100%.
When you're starting out with crypto. But with numerology, though, these courses are the knowledge is very, it actually needs to be, a lot of it does need to be gatekept to a certain extent, at least to a certain extent, because when realize how vindicated and accurate a lot of this information is, people can actually use it as a weapon. So you can use it, like the people with like a conscience, who have morality, good hearts, good souls, all that. They'll utilize this stuff for the good. But there are people out there, like, for example, like You can find all kinds of, once you've done enough research on it, you can find all kinds of examples of, the quote unquote elite of this world, the 13 families, whatever you want to call them. They all use this, they all know this stuff, and they all use this stuff themselves, which is one of the main reasons that led Gary down that path when he was younger, because he started to figure out that the elite were using this stuff themselves. So it's like, well, if these people are going to use it and it works, why shouldn't we? So like it's, down the line, I'll definitely be looking at doing some more advanced courses with GG33, but for now, I'm just happy to sort of just let things be as they are right now. And
so mostly just learning through his YouTube and things like that.
So you can go on YouTube, go on Instagram. Unfortunately, Elon Musk has banned his 2 biggest Twitter accounts, which was like loaded with all kinds of awesome information.
Yeah.
So, and there's a very little chance that those accounts will be unsuspended, unfortunately. So basically use YouTube, and there's a lot of videos on Rumble that you can't necessarily find on YouTube as well.
Okay.
And Instagram and TikTok have a lot of really cool short clips as well. So that's always a good place to start. And so there were a lot of Twitter, like recorded Twitter spaces and live streams that were put out in like when he first started getting his voice out there in a big way in 2023. So you can go back to all the way to the beginning of 23 or even late 2022, and that's when you can start to find a lot of free content that's out there.
Wow, so he's really quite recent then.
Yeah, but that like said though, he has been putting out content for a very, very long time.
Right, but he's only just recently blown up.
He actually started GG33 in 2011.
Wow. Yeah, because didn't DCC have him on his channel, Dollar Cost Crypto?
That's correct. More than once. So Gary's also would be very familiar. I put out some tweets, like video tweets on that as well. Gary knows. I would, if I had to guess, Richard would know who Gary is by now as well. But Gary definitely knows who Richard is, especially through Dollar Cost, through Miguel.
I think those clips, yep.
And, the connection is there.
Nice.
At least to our community.
I wouldn't be even in the slightest bit surprised if Richard knew who he was. I wouldn't be surprised if Richard's probably even done one of his courses. I know that Richard's done all sorts of self-development things. He's mentioned that he's done pretty much everything under the sun. So I wouldn't be surprised.
I can pretty confidently say that he wouldn't have done any of the like advanced stuff with GG33. Okay. But that said, like going through a lot of Richard's historic content that he's put out on Twitter, strongly indicates to me that he has at least somewhat of a basic understanding of how to apply numerology and astrology to his advantage. And I've actually done a whole bunch of recent tweets. If you jump on my Twitter now, I've actually put out I think just in the last couple of days, I've put out a couple of tweets addressing some of it.
Okay, nice. I'll look into it.
So let's go to you, brother. So what kind of stuff have you got going on at the moment? And talk to me about what's your take on where Richard Hart, like going into the rest of this year? You think the Interpol aspect of things is going to drop? What sort of catalyst do you think we need to happen to start to really inject bullish sentiment in our ecosystem and beyond?
I mean, my take on Richard is pretty much been consistent since the whole SEC, where he's kind of disappeared into the shadows. But from what I saw in his Christmas stream, not what are we, 2024? Not 2024. It was 2023, the Christmas stream, when you saw his eyes and it was just like, I know that look. I know that look of a person who's working his ass off. He's not sleeping. He's running his body into the ground. So when I saw that, it actually made me like feel really compassionate towards Richard. I was like, man, everyone is giving him so much shit, saying he's not doing anything, and that's the face of a man who's literally like literally killing himself because you're not sleeping, you're not taking care of your body, you're clipping years off your life. So he's someone who's trying to live longer and longevity, but he's literally killing himself through lack of sleep and overworking. So it actually really pisses me off when I see the disrespect shown towards Richard. So I'm very fond of Richard. I love Richard. I used to be very critical of Richard. I didn't like the outrage marketing phase, but I just think that I got sucked into it myself. Even though I knew it was deliberate, I still got sucked into it. That's how good it was. So for me, the outlook on Richard this year is we're still waiting on the clearance for the SEC. I think it's going to be like another 5 to 10 days. I think there's like a 20-day grace period. So maybe after that, something is going to happen. I'm honestly not too concerned whether or not he live streams. It would be great, but I don't think him live streaming is all of a sudden going to turn the chain upside down and everything's going to be bullish all of a sudden. I still maintain the same thesis as I've maintained from the start, that Pulse Chain is going to be one of the last chains to run. And if you haven't been paying attention to Pulse Chain, what's actually happening on Pulse Chain, then I think you're really missing out. If you've just been sitting here waiting for somebody to pump your bags for you, then you've missed out on in my opinion, probably a better opportunity than Hex, because now, like Hex, that's not to discount Hex at all, but now we've actually got a whole blockchain, this whole playing field of opportunities, while gas is extremely low, while prices are extremely suppressed. Like you have to be insane not to be playing with everything that's on Pulse Chain. It's like this whole playground. So that's how I feel about it. My outlook is still extremely bullish. My outlook remains the same, that we're going to have like a hockey stick heading towards the end of the bull market. That's just the way that it's going to be. Same as what happened with Hex. It's going to be the same.
So basically, you're implying sort of fourth quarter. So from October onwards. It's interesting you say that because, I've heard other people speak on that as well, and having that thesis as well. Sort of the fourth quarter. But in terms of Richard Hart's numerology, because his birthday is October 9th, so he will be moving into a new personal year cycle after his birthday, as you do. And so it's going to be interesting to see how him moving, because he'll be moving into his one personal year cycle, shifting away from his 9. So it's a start of a whole new cycle for him.
The cycles go for like X amount of years or something. Is that correct?
So personal year cycles go. So it's 1, 11, 3, 4, or 22, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then back to 1.
Okay, so now
essentially in generic terms, it's like it's a 9-year cycle. So that which is like a full. It's known as it's labeled as personal year cycle. So
okay.
So he's about to. So when he hits his birthday, he'll be moving into his 1, and 1 is the number of the masculine, number of leadership, all the masculine qualities, which
he has a lot of already. So
So it'll be interesting to see that if he waits until right after his birthday before he actually starts to put himself out there on the circuit again. But obviously, there's all kinds of dependent variables. October is especially in crypto terms, is so far away from here. So much can happen between now and then. All kinds of things could synergistically sort of line up or not. But
the way I look at it, I'm bullish long term on Pulse Chain. So whether we have a parabolic run this cycle or if we miss a parabolic run, it's not going to make a difference to my long term thesis. It would be fantastic if we have a parabolic run this year when everybody else, assuming we're still in a bullish trend, but my long term thesis is the same. So I've never felt more at ease and calm. The only thing that I'm not calm about is I don't have enough money to keep putting into these lows. That's the only thing that stresses me out.
I think a lot of people can resonate with that.
Exactly. That's probably the hardest thing. So I'm having to sell other tokens that I don't necessarily want to sell, but I'm thinking, well, okay, well, I can potentially get a 2x on this, and then cycles some of those profits back into the original coin that I wanted to hold over here. But now it's like the opportunities are just, you go where the opportunities are greatest, and this, in my opinion, is where the opportunity is the greatest. So I think this is going. I think Pulse Chain is going to exceed everybody's expectations, and I'm not talking about price performance. I'm talking about what it actually means for the world of finance.
Yeah, man, because that's a big reason why I'm in it as well. For me, it's extends far beyond. I mean, obviously, the money matters. No one can deny that, but it can't just be solely about that alone. And for me, it's definitely it's a full package deal for me. And what was I going to say? Yeah, so you were talking about bullish long-term Pulse Chain. I mean, it makes perfect sense. Like, that's what's crazy to me is that Pulse Chain hasn't actually had a bull cycle yet. This is Pulse Chain's first cycle.
Yeah.
So it actually makes sense. Like, even if you want to argue that 2025 is bearish as hell, and we've got a super cycle or whatever, what narrative you want to throw out there in that context, age of something matters in crypto, whether people like it or not. And Pulse Chain is, it's not even 2 years old yet.
No.
And it gets all the benefits of ETH as well. And as outlined on one of Richard's latest tweets as well, which I'd forgotten about, is that ETH gets the bugs. If there are bugs, ETH gets it first. So Pulse Chain has the advantage from a technological standpoint. Pulse Chain has technical advantages that ETH doesn't in certain regards as well. Ethereum, the reality is, like I've been saying it for a long while, ETH is, it's a lot older. I haven't been impressed with Vitalik as well in a lot of ways in recent years as well, compared to, at least by comparison to how he was, in previous cycles. And it's just, I definitely haven't liked people like really being so aggressive about if ETH goes down, Pulse Chain is leverage on ETH, period, full stop. Like, people that are like that, and they're like, oh, ETH goes down, Pulse Chain is just going to keep going down more, 100% correlated. There's no discussion. There's nuances. Like, it's not that black and white. And we've seen how Hex can many times. There've been many examples of Hex decorrelating from the rest of the market. Obviously we're talking about Hex on Ethereum, but also Hex on Pulse Chain as well, and they're liquidity linked as well. So it's more there's more chaoticness and randomness in how coins move than people tend to think. Despite, I mean, obviously you've got the bonding because of the liquidity and other factors, but again, it's not black and white. So I'm never going to be in the camp where I automatically assume, ETH just keeps like getting savaged, so that means Pulse Chain automatically has to keep going down until ETH finds its floor. Nah, bullshit. So
I think there's I'm pretty much exactly with you, man. I think there's definitely a correlation, but we have the capacity to decorrelate. But we're really in a period now where we're really reliant on them in a way. But I don't think that that's going to last forever. I mean, just like Fast Abdul says here, Ethereum is Pulse Chain's testnet. So it's actually really interesting because people often criticize this idea that Richard has just forked this chain. The tech is not good and it's old technology. People keep criticizing this. But again, I think Richard does everything better than, like, he takes something that was really good and then makes it into its perfect form. And so I think Pulse Chain is just, it's so severely underestimated by the rest of the market. I know that this is like copium and hopium, but I just think that there's the future that I see on Pulse Chain is like, the synchronicities that I've had. I'm not huge, like I'm not against numerology or anything like that. I'm just not in tune with it. But synchronicities, I'm really in tune with that. And when I have synchronicities, I'm like, this is universe. I'm in the flow. And when I'm having like 10 a day and my whole consciousness is exploding and I'm like, I can't sleep just from all this euphoric bliss, and I'm having all these revelations, and this is what's going to happen. It's like the future is so bright for Pulse Chain. There's literally no doubt in my mind. So it's really unfortunate to see everybody's like mentality in the wider, but it's also it also makes a lot of sense too, because a lot of people have the expectation that somebody else is just going to come along and do it for them. But the people that are actually doing the work are loving everything about Pulse Chain right now. I mean, if we do have our parabolic run, it's never going to ever get to these prices ever again. Like nothing on the chain is ever going to be this low. And so if you wanted to build and create liquidity positions, and you're never ever going to have these positions ever again in the future. So now is like the most blessed time to really prepare your land, sow your seeds. But people don't have that mindset. They just want that Lambo yesterday. It's like, and that's unfortunate for them. But for me, I'm just like, it's just so grateful for everything that's happening on Pulse Chain.
Yeah, and you'll find too that it'll probably surprise you how there'll be a lot of people in crypto today that actually haven't experienced a bull cycle before.
True.
Which is something to really like digest, because I mean, I sort of still even take it a little bit for granted that some people would even consider me like a seasoned veteran, because I've gone through a full market cycle now. Because I came in like right before the DeFi season of 2020. I started dipping my toes in around the halving of 2020, and then took after 4 or 5 months of navigating the space, found Hex, and rest is history. But I'll never forget like when you actually experienced euphoria, like actual not just euphoria necessarily in a single coin. Like okay, you sort of binked it on this one random shit coin, and like fucking amazing. Yeah. But to actually experience crypto wide, like macro wide euphoria across the entire market. Yeah. We haven't seen that yet this cycle.
No.
But I was there last cycle, and I experienced it. And what's crazy was last cycle it actually began in the Bitcoin halving year with the DeFi season. You were already feeling it then, and that was like well before the big like runs started to happen in 21.
So you were all over Twitter in those days as well, right?
Yeah, man. Yeah, I was active as hell. I was sort of semi-active before on Twitter. Before I actually found Hex and Pulse Chain, I didn't have any incentive to get involved with any community. Mm-hmm. Everything that I was seeing out there, I was like, all right, there's this coin, that coin, this chain, that chain. All right, I'm going to try this out, try that out, see if this works or whatever, and just play around with it all. And yeah, it was like full like Wild West back then. And I can't only imagine how much Wild West it was even the cycle before that. But yeah, it was I had no reason to get. There was no incentive. I wasn't seeing any other community out there that was worthy of my time and energy and my work. But I understood it even at that stage before finding Hex and Richard Hart that Twitter was the hub for crypto in terms of like you literally need to be on Twitter to be like if you're gonna take crypto seriously, you've got to be on Twitter to gauging like the release of information like on an hourly basis. In order to make sure you've got edge and all that stuff. So I already understood that. But then when I saw Richard Hart for the first time and how I stumbled across it is its own story. I've told some people in the past how I ended up coming across it. But
do you mind sharing? Or
so the gist of it was I was on an Elliot Trades.
Yeah.
He's one of the mainstream mouthpieces in crypto.
Yep.
He was one of the channels that, me being the noob back then, he was one of the channels I was following.
Yep.
And at the end of the, like usually, like, I don't know how he formats his streams now, but back then he would go on his rants. And then at the end, he would do a little segment where he speaks to people in the comments. Mm-hmm. And there was this one random, because Hex at that time, it was around late October when Hex made its initial like new high. And someone in the chat, and by the way, it also took me like nearly a couple of years to actually find out who this Hexagon was. that dropped this comment in his chat that literally made Elio Trades say something about it, because all of them were like just they were intentionally suppressing it, like intentionally censoring it, like not talking about it. No matter how high the price went, they just wouldn't talk about it. And so this Hexagon went in the comment. Can't remember what his comment was, but it was enough to get under the skin of Elio to say something about it and to congratulate Hexagons. And he was talking about Hexagons. I was like, what? And then when he said that, I'm like, what the hell? What coin is that? Never heard of that. And I was like, practically every day, like navigating the space, and somehow I hadn't heard Richard Hart's name or anything. And then that was it. And then I watched a couple of Richard Hart videos, and I went into the Effin Hangout, RG3's Effin Hangout, because that stream was on like since the very early days. And I was, gauging, how that stream was, was managed, and liked RG3 and liked a lot of the people that were coming onto the stream talking about Hex and all that stuff. And I'm like, yeah, okay, this is definitely something I can genuinely get behind, both in the context of financial freedom and in the context of crypto's underlying principles, which I care a lot about. So it ticked both those boxes, which was huge. And that was, at that point I knew, okay, I've got to step up my Twitter account in terms of like me. And I just organically over time, through trial and error and putting in the work, figured out like what worked and what didn't in terms of like Twitter content, how to generate engagement, tapping into the algorithm and utilizing the algorithm as best as possible. Even though it was, in some ways, it was trickier at that time because it was still full woke on Twitter at that time. Like Musk hadn't taken over Twitter yet. So it was like the level of censorship was on a different level at that time. So you sort of had to skirt around that as well at the same time. But again, 2021, that was my domination year. Because the thing was, I didn't know about any of this stuff back then. So 2021 was my ox year. And the 1 year, I mean, you have positive energy in your friend energy years. For example, you're a tiger, so you'll have the energy, you'll have the positive energy around you in the dog year and the horse year, because you're a tiger, because they're your friend signs.
Dog and horse. I need to take note of that.
Yeah. So you're aware, next year is the horse year.
So, is it?
Correct. Yeah. So from February, so the horse year starts.
We're going far lap next year.
So I would, but again, there's nuance though, because you still need to understand your personal year cycle and how your personal year cycle might sort of whether your personal year cycle positively synergizes with it or negatively. Gotcha. So there's complexity, but overall though, even just having that awareness that you're in your positive energy next year, being tiger in horse year I would take advantage of that. But I sort of got off track there, but I got a bit off track there. I can't remember what I was getting at.
You were basically talking about how you got introduced to Richard Hart first of all, and then
right. So I was in my ox year, and so basically, more or less and I was, and the year before the ox is the rat, and the rat and the ox are soulmate. So as an ox, I actually have back-to-back really positive energy with the rat and the ox years, is because they're side by side.
Okay.
So 2020 was the rat and 2021 was the ox. So even though it was before the ox year, the energy was already huge. It was massively like positive for me, just being in the rat year as well. So without me knowing it, like I had like me like consciously deciding to go harder on Twitter and being involved and just really going hard into crypto overall, that was going to have a positive impact on me by taking those actions in that and timing those actions at that period of time.
Gotcha.
So timing is everything when it comes to this stuff.
See, this is where this sort of stuff gets really fascinating for me, because I feel like my life is just continuously trending up. And if next year is supposed to be a year where I'm going to have a lot of positive energy, it's like, holy shit, like
Yeah.
everything is already getting so positive. I wonder what next year is going to be like. So,
well, it's interesting that you're saying that too, because again, like I'd have to verify this, going down the rabbit hole further and getting more advanced knowledge. But what I would speculate is, if you're already feeling energetically positive, it's probably because it's leading up towards a positive energy year next year. And I've seen enough evidence based on things that Gary and GG3 people have said in the past that I've taken on board, is that even for example, if your enemy year is coming up and you're say maybe even 2 or 3 weeks before your enemy year, I've seen many examples of bad things already starting to happen even just before the enemy year starts. So the energy is already starting. You're already starting to feel the approach of that energy, the change of energy, even before the actual year starts.
Gotcha.
So you might be feeling a little bit of that as well.
Gotcha.
But yeah. So
I'll have to look into it more. So.
Yeah, man. But I think unless there's something else that you want to touch upon crypto wise before we might wrap up the stream.
Not necessarily. Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty much very much in tune with your perspective from following you on Twitter, and it seems like we're pretty aligned with our positions for this year. Is your position is bullish for this year as well, by the sounds of things, and you're also, like you mentioned, your perspective. You said there's some people who've got a parabolic perspective. Do you not share that perspective, or what's your perspective?
Yes, as anyone that's been following me for long enough on Twitter, I've always since the beginning been long-term bullish on X. That's not going to change anytime soon. Yep. And naturally, with all the other RH cores that are directly bonded to both Hex on Pulse Chain and Hex on Ethereum, the bullishness is automatically there just on that front alone. But there's so many reasons to be bullish, because there's still so much hatred and still so much bearish sentiment out there on it. So people aren't in. The thing is, and this is one of the things that Somi talks about a lot on his streams, and shout out to Somi, love that dude, is when the green candles are flooding in, that's not the time to be bullish. That's the time to actually be bearish, that's when all the buyers are coming in. So that's when you actually start to, even though it seems counterintuitive or contrary to what it's supposed to be, that's how it works. Because when all the buyers are in and the green candles are going apeshit, that's when it's dangerous, because it's the higher it goes, the more likely it's gonna the higher and higher it goes, the sooner and sooner the top is most likely going to be set, which means you've got to be bearish, and you don't want a round trip, and I understand the experience of round tripping quite well. So, a
lot of us do with the Hex crowd.
Yeah, and if you've been through a cycle, at least one full cycle, you understand it better, than most people that haven't actually experienced it firsthand.
It's both the blessing and the curse of Hex, because it really is the long-term staking. It binds the whole community together. It keeps us striving towards this future that we're collectively trying to bring about, really. I mean, whether you believe in manifesting or anything like that, I mean, I certainly do, but collectively doing that together is very, very powerful. So we're united by this 15-year stake, all of us, the whole community, in a way. So it's really it gives us an X factor that no other community has. Actually, there's no staying power in any other community. I mean, there might be. That's a bit of a lie. XRP, the banks are going to adopt us. It's like, well, the banking system is a scam. Why would you want the banks to adopt you? So Whereas this is something that's really different. It's really like the length of time that's bonding us together is really, really unique about this community. So,
correct. Yeah, and Richard R is no fool. You know,
no,
he is a mega intelligent individual.
yeah,
he understands game theory better than anyone,
mm.
and he's basically codified Hex, and by extension, you know, the Pulse Chain ecosystem with the game theory, with the most price positive game theory you can come up with. But again, that doesn't necessarily imply that there's no guarantees in anything in crypto.
No.
Insane volatility in both directions. Especially in the kind of crypto climate and general economic climate that we're in now. There's definitely no and I just put out a tweet just earlier today that it's the key to maintaining mental stability overall is to have extremely low expectations, which can be difficult to do, especially if you've been grinding through a lot of pain in the context of price charts and your DCA buying the lows for a long period of time. It can feel extremely exhausting, but at the same, so you sort of have that, you want to sort of cling to that expectation of, I've been going through this, so you feel like you're supposed to feel entitled, that you're supposed to get the pumps because of that. But it can be a dangerous game from a mental standpoint and emotional standpoint. To operate that way, because the old cliche, which is true, the larger the expectation, the greater the disappointment. And that notion of disappointment sets in mentally and emotionally, it can really screw with you. So, and at the end of the day, our lives from cradle to grave in this matrix, in this reality, is dictated by digits, and you can. I like to say, it's still digits on the screen. Just completely losing your mind over digit. Whether you have ones or zeros on there. It's not worth just doing all kinds of crazy shit because of that. But that said, we unfortunately, we live in a reality where we do need to take all that stuff seriously. So I get it. But at the end of the day, I'd sort of encourage people to just always bring yourself back to the present moment, and the calendar is the calendar when it comes to the crypto cycles, and just to remain focused on that. If you've got powder, allocate that accordingly based on how you happen to, whatever you see fit. But yeah, going back to reasons to be bullish, the fact that the price. This is one last thing that I want to touch on before we wrap up.
Sure.
Arguably the most important event that's happened in the context of the Hex ecosystem, and how that translates with Pulse Chain and everything on Pulse Chain, is the OA staking.
Okay, in what sense?
And I haven't really seen that many hexagons thus far, really go into depth into how big that actually is in terms of massively cutting the inflation, because basically the OA hadn't made any really serious moves since Big Payday, which was over 4 years ago, which is 20 lifetimes in crypto terms. What are your thoughts on the OA staking and how that will enhance? Sort of gives. How do you see it? Do you see it as a strongly bullish factor going forward?
I do see it as bullish. I have a very simple take on it, and that's just that he's trying to reduce the selling pressure. That's how I see it. I don't really have a very complicated perspective on it, or a game theory perspective on it. I'd love to hear your perspective on it, though. Mine is as simple as that. What's your perspective on it?
Extremely bullish, of course. I echo what you just said with regard to just massive. Like the biggest aspect of it for me is that it really, which is what we want to see, is punishing the short-term stakers from being able to constantly dump like the extra yield on the community. So, and also it's even not just the OA staking in isolation, it's the massive reduction in liquidity as well on top of that. So having both of those things happen simultaneously also makes it harder for these sharks with large bags who have been just raking in the yield and just constantly dumping it. They're getting far less yield now, so there's far less incentive to stake short term, which basically means, and I've touched on this in prior tweets, that you basically left with two choices. You can get really crappy yields and continue doing the short-term staking, or you can seek out or exit and leave and find other ways of mass extracting short-term yield in other systems, like in other kind of yield farms or whatever. Or you can stay in the system, stake long-term and not worry about it, and just know that even if the yield is cut, maybe 5-10 years from now, the OA could very easily make the opposite moves again, increase the yield again, and reward people for staking longer today, and also in the past as well. Or just keep it, or you just keep it liquid, and then just bite your fingernails while you're holding liquid, and then decide. And of course, you'd be incentivized if you're not going to yield. Like if you've still got stakes as well, it would incentivize the larger players, the short-term yield players, to ES, even some of their longer stakes, even potentially, and which is good for the stakers, because the stakers are getting, especially if it's a big payday stake, because big payday stakes still retain a huge amount of that yield. So literally now, the way I look at it is, people that have made big payday stakes are going to have that extra incentive to not EES because of how hard it is to actually get the extra yield in Hex now. So a massive percentage of the yield now will be left in the big payday stakes. And actually, and since the beginning to now, a lot of those big payday stakes have actually been ended already. So the big payday stakes that are left, and the thing about the big payday stakes is, even if you end the stakes even one day before maturity, you still lose it all the big payday yield. You have to end it on the day. I think you get a pass if you end it like a little bit late, or if you end the stake late. But if you end it early, it's definitely a nuke of the big payday yield.
Right, gotcha.
So
I didn't know that.
There is now an extra like game theory aspect for big players who still have the big payday stakes, to hold on to them till maturity. But then again, you could argue, well, if the price goes up enough in this year or in the near future, there still might be the incentive to want to end even the big payday stakes early if the price goes up high enough. But again, that's the natural forces of supply and demand and the market or whatever. But at least while the prices are still low, there is that incentive to not ES, at least the big payday stakes. But even still, like even the early stakes that aren't big payday stakes, I think it's bullish for those players to end those stakes, because then the staker class gets all that, which is still a solid amount of yield, even without being big payday stakes, if they're like 2021, 22 stakes. So that's my just overall just take on that.
Awesome take. Yeah, and I think maybe just to add one more quick thing to that is, even psychologically, whether or not the OA is Richard Hart or not doesn't bother me. I feel whoever it is in some way connected to Richard Hart, and so just psychologically, it's like, I'm still here. I'm still here and I'm still protecting this ecosystem until everything goes to shit, or it's not going to go to shit. But there's still someone there that's like, there's that kind of element to it as well. People, communicating with us on the blockchain. Everyone kind of has a lot of fun with this idea. But I really feel that with this move that the OA has made as well, it's really it's reassuring in my opinion. So
I just want to also just quickly just want to give a shout out to the chat, everyone that's in the chat, putting in the comments. Really appreciate you all here supporting the stream. There's definitely going to be a lot more content to come, and also want to give a special shout out to Bluey. I see him in the comments there. We go back. Bluey's an awesome bloke, it's always good to see some of these OGs like jumping in here and supporting our streams and all that. So I think I'll wrap it up there, even though we definitely could easily go for a lot longer. We want to keep the streams to be not too long. Thanks again, brother, for coming on the stream. I respect all your work and all the contributions that you've made to the Pulse Chain ecosystem over your journey. I've been following you for a long time, so I really respect what you do. And keep up with the amazing work, and looking forward to collaborating more with you in the future.
Definitely, man. And yeah, same to you. I really appreciate, when you're trying to build a following, getting a follow from someone like yourself, someone that I respected and liked your content, it really means a lot to me. And I'm honored that I was the first person that you've done a stream with. So I really appreciate you asking me, and there's definitely going to be more in the future, man. This was very enjoyable.
Oh, good, guys. All right, well, I'll call it there. It's been a pleasure, and I will see you all on the other side very soon.
Take care, everyone.